Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today's chapter break episode features Tammy Borden and her latest publication, Waltraud, a true story of growing up in Nazi Germany, which was released in July 2023.
Tammy Borden is a sought-after speaker and author of Waltraud, a true story of growing up in Nazi Germany, a World War II novel based on her mother's firsthand accounts as a German girl during one of the darkest chapters in history. As a professional copywriter turned novelist, she also worked in nonprofits for more than 20 years, where she helped others tell their stories before pursuing her own creative endeavors. She and her husband live in Wisconsin, where they enjoy nature, gardening, and Sunday afternoon naps.
Who doesn't love a Sunday afternoon nap? So let's take a quick look at Waltraud, a true story of growing up in Nazi Germany. This is a gripping tale of survival and quiet resistance. Inspired by true accounts of the real Waltraud, the author's mother, the novel shines a rare light on World War II from a German citizen perspective inside Hitler's Germany and introduces an unsung heroine who refuses to give in to an ideology of hate. Waltraud is more than a story of war. It is a testament to resilience, unbreakable love, and the strength of the human spirit.
Yes, I can't wait to talk about this with you. Welcome, Tammy, to Midwest Writers Room. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I think this is going to open all of our eyes to a new window into history. Before we dive into the book itself, let's talk about you. It was in your bio, so you have a background in copywriting and writing, and then moving into this novel. Can you trace the point where this story came to you when you knew, okay, this is something I've got to write about, and I've got to take the leap to do a book?
Sure. So I grew up hearing my mom's stories my whole life. I remember them as a child, but I also remember that they were stories I didn't hear in school, in my history class or social studies class. They were stories that were different because they were from a German perspective. And my mom grew up during World War II. She was 12 years old when the war began. And as I went on in life, I just kind of tucked those stories in the back of my mind. And I'd always loved writing, and I knew that at some point in my life, I was going to write a book about my mom and her remarkable stories. She had an incredible memory, almost photographic. And so she remembered some really incredible details. I decided that I would write this book, and especially after we went and visited Germany. And we went to all the towns where she lived, walked those cobblestone streets. And it's there that I was like, this has to be a novel. And so I started writing it before my mom passed away. And and I finally finished it. And so that's kind of how it came to be.
All right. And so one thing I always love to delve into this with different authors, and I don't always ask it. I should every time, but from the moment you essentially typed your first word until you got done and said, "Okay, this is finished and ready for publication," like what kind of time frame are we talking about?
Oh, goodness. So I started writing the book probably 2018-ish, before my mom passed away. And she passed away in 2020. And after she passed away, I could not look at that manuscript for 2.5 years. It was just too painful. My mom and I were extremely close. And finally, I finally picked it back up and decided, you know what, if I don't do this and I don't start again, I'm just going to keep putting it off indefinitely. So I picked it back up. And once I did, it was one of those situations, and I don't know if you've ever had this as a writer, but I was compelled to write. I could not stop. It was all I thought about when I woke up, before I went to bed, my lunch breaks, everything. I just sat there and I wrote. And this was in the waning days of COVID. And so there was a lot more time to do this. Things weren't really open yet. And, I was still working remotely at home during this time. And so I just found as many moments as I could. And when I picked it back up, I had probably written about a third of it. And I had originally written it in third person about my mom. And I read it and I was like, nope, it's not right. And so I decided I was going to change it all to first person, to have the narrative be from my mother's perspective through her eyes, to have her tell you the story just like she told me the story. And so I rewrote everything I had and I just kept going. And I probably finished my first draft in 3 months. And from there, I went through the editing process, the 100,000 times that you read through it to make sure you've not missed something, and had a friend design the cover, and I published it within 7 months after picking it back up.
That's impressive. That is very impressive.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is. That's quite a story. And I can imagine it makes kind of sense that you had to put it away for a hot minute and couldn't quite
Yes,
face it.
I couldn't, because the way that I captured my mom's stories, many of them, was that I recorded her. I recorded my mom telling stories. I had video of her and audio recordings. She didn't always know I was doing that. She did eventually, but um, and so that meant listening to her voice. And after she passed away, that was just, it was too much. I couldn't do it without just being a blubbering mess. And
Yeah.
even when I picked it back up, I still was extremely emotional. I mean, it's hard to imagine and convey just how close my mom and I were. And to hear her voice was just very difficult.
Yeah. Tell us about the word Waltraud
Waltraud.
and say
So,
it in your beautiful German way as
uh,
well.
yes, well, in America, we pronounce it Waltraud. In German, it's Waltraud. So Waltraud was my mother's name, my mother's first name. And it's very unusual here in the United States, but in Germany during the 1920s and 30s, even into the 40s, it was extremely popular. It was probably in the top 20 names for German girls. It means strength, and my mom lived up to that. It also means stubborn.
Did she have a nickname that friends shortened it to, or do they always stick to the Waltraud?
Well, for a while there, my mom went by her middle name, which was Emma. And then at some point, she just decided, nope, my name is Waltraud, and that's what you're going to call me. And people butchered it all the time, and she just went with it.
Because if it's a guy under that name as another guy, the first thing I'm shortening it to is Wally. That obviously
Yep.
doesn't quite fit in this setting.
So I have a brother named Waldemar, which was also a very common German name for boys, and we always called him Wally.
Nice. I think it's just so fitting that her name meant, strength, powerful strength. I think that's so fitting. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about your path to publication once you finished the book.
Well, I finished the book and I'd heard about agents and publicists and all of this kind of stuff. And I also heard from some fellow authors that I had tried to connect with that it could take years for my story to get out there. And I am just way too impatient for that. Um, but one of the reasons I chose to self-publish really was more that I imagined this a personal project to preserve my mother's memories, to share them with my family, to share them with my friends. And then after 6 months, after all my friends and my family did the obligatory, yes, Tammy, we'll buy your book, it would fade away and it would just go into the sunset and I'd get on with my life. I never imagined in a million years that I would still be here 2.5 years later talking about it, going to events, being invited to book clubs, speaking at libraries, talking with you. Like, I just never imagined that would happen. And so I never seriously considered pursuing an agent.
Yeah. Based on all of your, visits with readers, what do you think is the reason that it's resonating so much?
Well, there are a lot of reasons, I think. I think, first of all, my mom was an extraordinary human being. and she had a very compelling story. I also think her story is just extremely timely for the times that we're in right now and the things that are going on in the world. And I do hear that a lot from people. I also think there's just a deep fascination with World War II. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of World War II novels in the world. And I think what makes mine stand out from those is that mine is from a German citizen perspective. There are very few novels told from the German perspective because there's this assumption that if you were German, you were a Nazi. And that simply wasn't the case. I mean, just think of our own country today. Germany was deeply divided, much like our own country. And so there were many who did not embrace the ideology of what was going on. The difference then is that you spoke out, you went to a protest, you called your representative, you disappeared. And we have no concept of that. And so the narrative that most people hear is that, well, all Germans went along with it and they stuck their heads in the sand. And I wanted to share a story that showed, no, that really wasn't the case. There were many, yes, who embraced what was going on, but there were also many who did not. And my mom and her family were among them. And so I think that unique perspective has really resonated with people.
And I think too, we learn it from a different angle because there's that old saying, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but victors write the history, right? So we see that era probably from a different angle here in America than they may have seen over in Europe.
Right.
All right, Luella, are we ready to dive into the reading?
Yeah, Tammy, whenever you're ready, maybe tell our listeners where in your novel you're going to begin so that we're oriented, but you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. So I'm going to be reading from my book. This is a portion of the story that shares what it was like to go through bombings in Germany as a German citizen. All right. Every major city in Germany was getting hit, including Braunschweig, and small cities too. One attack unleashed thousands of pounds of bombs on Frankfurt, but most of them missed their target and landed on a small town less than 25 kilometers away. Their poor aim became the brunt of many jokes no one laughed at. If night raids weren't bad enough, bomber planes started coming during the daytime with hardly any warning. While attending classes in Wolfenbüttel, air raid sirens wailed. Screaming students came bolting into the hallway, knocking anything in their path to the floor, including me. "Get to the bunker!" cried one young man. "But it's the middle of the day," I yelled, wrangling myself upright and gathering my books. Someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up, swinging me around. "Just run!" We ran into the street, rushing to the bunker a block away. No time to grab our coats. Adrenaline pumped through my body, making the crisp air feel warm as I sprinted down the street. "Cover your head!" someone yelled at me. "They'll see your red hair." I'd never heard anything so ridiculous, but I raised my textbook and covered my head nonetheless. The thunderous onslaught of bombers combined with the whir of propellers. The blue sky was filled with white, wispy ribbons trailing behind dozens of planes as they flew overhead. Their shadows slithered across the ground like giant winged ghosts, practically blocking out the sun. Chest heaving, heart racing, throat raw from the cold air filling my lungs, I ran. I tripped. One of my books tumbled to the ground, its pages flapping in the wind. I scrambled back up, ignoring the tear in my dress and my bloody elbow. Would I make it to the bunker in time? Or would a bomb descend down, 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 blasting me into oblivion and splattering my flesh against the cobblestones? I made it, and the planes flying overhead didn't drop their bombs on us. They were aiming for Braunschweig again, less than 25 kilometers away.
was a great excerpt to take us right into the action, that's for sure. I loved your description of the shadows slithering across the ground.
Yeah, I really try to paint a picture with my writing to create a theater of the mind. I hear from a lot of readers that they felt like they were walking alongside my mom, and I feel like there's no greater compliment than that.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
definitely an
here,
action
here.
scene. I could tell Luella liked it because I'm looking at the shared document off the side while you're reading, and she's highlighting that specific phrase. I'm like, oh, there's one Luella likes. So I do have to ask you, Tammy, your pronunciation, your accent here is good. Are you fluent in German yourself?
Oh, I used to be. I used to be fluent as a child. In fact, I spoke only German at home. And as the years went on, and especially since my mom died, I don't use German anymore. Um, and so I'm not fluent anymore. I know just enough to get in trouble and not enough to get out of trouble. So,
Nice. Tell our listeners where they can find your book and where they can find more about you.
well, they can find me at my website, tammyborden.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. As far as my books, they're available at um, some retail outlets, including Amazon, of course, and you can get it at libraries. You can get it pretty much anywhere. It's also available on audio.
And you had already mentioned that, despite this book already being out, geez, what, 2.5 years by at the time of this recording, that it's still very active and you're still very active in engagements. What do you have coming up on the docket?
Yeah, so I am just constantly getting asked to go to events, which blows my mind. I have been at more than 170 events since I published my book, and among them are 80 book clubs. So if anybody has a book club, I'm happy to come. But some upcoming public events I have are in Ripon, Menasha, Watoma in April. I'm also at Spring Green Library in April 22nd. In May, I'm in Brookfield, and there's an Appleton Book Fair. And then in June, I'm at the Delafield Library.
Very cool. And those are all listed on your website, and we'll throw the link down in our show notes. Part of me is wondering as you're talking about why this is so popular. I just wonder if Wisconsin, Minnesota, this area would be the epicenter for a German historical book, just given the heritage that our state has and drawing my interest. Would there be as much interest in this type of book, say in Arizona, right? Or Utah, or a place where it's not as heavily German oriented. So I think that definitely has got to help.
That could be. There's a lot of German heritage here in Wisconsin, especially. In fact, my parents immigrated to Milwaukee in 1951 with my two oldest siblings. And at that time, Germany, Milwaukee had the highest per capita German population of any city in the entire country. And so I do think there's a lot of resonance with the German community in our state.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. Well, at this time, I want to thank Tammy for coming on, taking time to introduce everybody to Waltraud, a true story of growing up in Nazi Germany. Thanks everybody out there for hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.